Behind the Rack, Episode 2, Honoring Those Who Serve. My guest today is good friend and fellow Air Force veteran, Paul LaScola. We were stationed together on 2 different occasions in the early 2000s, so it was really good to sit down and catch up on old times. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Please welcome to the show, Air Force veteran, Paul LaScola. All right, we're rolling. Paul, welcome to Behind the Rack.
Thank you, Brian.
Been looking forward to coming over and talking to you.
Heck yeah. This is good stuff. I appreciate you coming by.
Thanks, man. It seems like just yesterday, it was 2003. We were in Korea, so.
Yeah, funny how time just kind of goes by that quick.
Yeah, and within a matter of minutes, it feels like we're right back there.
Ain't that the truth? Man, yep.
So
good
what
stuff.
do you say? Let's see if we can do an episode.
Sure. Sounds good.
All right. Well, I'd like to start off with where were you born and what did your parents do?
I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. My parents, they were born and raised in Italy, and they immigrated to this country. You know, first it was my dad that came to this country when he was like 17 or 18 years old. Literally floated across the Atlantic Ocean. He didn't come by plane because he didn't have the money for a plane ticket. And processed through, New York City. Where they came to was a small Italian community in St. Louis. So it was surrounded by, other authentic, full-blooded Italians. But to be in St. Louis, you still had the exposure to the American people. And so I don't think it took him too long to pick up the language. And from that point, I forget exactly what he did, as far as jobs was concerned, but I think it was from when he was, 23 to 26 is when he joined the military.
Really?
Yeah, so he did the Army, and so that's something that certainly helped him as far as getting his naturalization to, become the citizen. Yeah. And so he only did 3 years. I don't remember nitty-gritty details. I think, as I recall, he kind of had a thought or idea that he might like to do it for a career. But, I guess in any branch of service, there's the good and the bad, right? There's stuff that happens, right? That I guess for him, there was just a few too many things that I guess didn't sit well with him for whatever good there was, that and so he decided after 3 years that that's it. Time for him to get out and try to, move on to other things. But there, there was his experience with the U.S. military where he did that much. I think it was, I don't know if he was still in or if he had just gotten out when he did a trip back to Italy, and that's when him and my mom met. Yeah.
Okay.
And so eventually from that, he got married, and he brought her over here. And so I was born, hatched a couple of years after that. And that was 1970.
1970.
So, yeah.
So what was it like growing up in St. Louis in the 70s?
I mean, I'm a little kid, so, I might be oblivious to some of the things that kind of go on around you. I'm just a little kid that my primary focus is to go hang out with my friends and play cowboys and Indians and whatever. But for as far as I can say from my perspective as a little kid, it was all good. Any city you go to, there's good and there's bad. I'd say I had it pretty good. Mom and Dad, they weren't making bucket loads of money, but they managed well enough to keep things good and keep things right between me and I got 2 younger brothers.
Okay.
And so yeah, growing up, was actually pretty decent in St. Louis through the 70s and the 80s.
So did you get into like big hair bands?
Oh,
the
dear
80s?
God, yeah.
What was your music of choice?
Oh, boy. It's so easy to make fun of that stuff when we sit here and look at that stuff now.
Right.
But, man, that was actually still good stuff,
Hey,
Van Halen and AC/DC, man.
That's right.
That's it. Well, there was more than that, but son of a gun. Jeez. Yeah, I was all about that. I didn't dress up like that.
Right.
Mom and Dad were not going to have me, looking like Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth. That was not happening, but that was my music.
It has stood the test of time.
Yeah. Jeez. It's always good. Call me the crusty old man. It's just what I hear coming out today.
Right.
Lots of it, I'm just like, nah, not for me,
Yeah.
So that was good stuff, When I was 10 years old is when we moved out of the old neighborhood, that there was predominantly somewhat tight-knit Italian community, and moved out of there because the house was so darn small. I mean, it was a shotgun style, two bedroom house, and so it was me and my 2 brothers sharing one room.
Oh wow.
And so we had moved out, and we went out because that was like the city, technically the city, and so we moved out into the suburbs, that's where actually my parents still are to this day. That was quite a bit of a change, but that worked out. It worked out still perfectly good. Had no problems blending in with making new friends, and so it was still all good. I'd say I mean, ups and downs with anybody's childhood, but overall we had it pretty good.
So do you remember when you first started thinking about going to the military?
Oh yeah, ever since I was a little kid. I don't know exactly what age, where I really had it cemented in my head. But when we're little kids, we always going out there playing cowboys and Indians, and playing army and this and that. But I guess at some point in high school, there was my dad that did his time in the Army. I got my my one grandfather on my mom's side that he was career military, the Italian Navy. And one thing was that I found quite interesting was that he is also a World War II veteran. He died some years ago. World War II veteran in Italy, fought for Mussolini.
Really?
Fought for Mussolini, yes, against the U.S. forces.
Wow.
Yep. So I always found that to be like, wow. I to try and process that in my head.
Right.
He even had a couple of stories about being caught by U.S. forces. At least one instance, I think maybe twice, where he was captured, and so here he is, POW, and whether it happened once or twice, either way, he escaped. Got out, escaped.
I thought you were gonna say he was released, but
he escaped.
Come on now,
bro, busted out. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow.
Well, I'm glad he did.
Yeah, I am too. I am too. But my grandfather, as well as pretty much everybody else in the country, they at some point realized that they were aligned with the wrong side.
Right.
He was loyal to Mussolini, but I guess things really started to click at some point, and it was becoming very clear that for Mussolini to get himself aligned with the likes of Hitler, it became pretty obvious. So at any rate, I had that in my family.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I had, everybody under the sun, like some people that have, my dad, my 5 uncles, my grandfather, my great-grandfather,
Right, back to the Civil War.
I didn't have, quite that much family history attached or connected to the military, but I had that much. And so from high school, it started to cement in my head a little bit more. At first I thought the Navy, that kind of tapered off a little bit. I ended up graduating high school, and for most people that would have just naturally stepped right into going to the recruiter's office out of high school, more or less. I really didn't do that exactly right away. I got a younger brother that he tried. He did I think a semester or something like that at the community college, and he's like, I'm not feeling this, and he's the one that went in the Marines and did that for 4 years. But I gave it a little bit more of a go after high school with civilian life. And then at some point, that's where I met what was my first wife. Between the two of us, we didn't continue the college path. And we ended up getting married, and then stepped into the regular full-time jobs.
Right.
We ended up working at the same place.
Okay.
She was in the office, and I was in the machine shop. And that lasted for a bit until, that thought and that feeling and that desire never, it was always there. I think it was late 92 when we sat down and had a discussion and decided that, okay, I'm going to go on ahead and make this move to join the military. So go to the recruiter's office. I identified a specific AFSC for signing the bottom line, and it was communications. But I also did delayed entry because at that time, here we are with a house and needing the time to try and sell it and get all the rest of our life in order and lined up to try and make this transition. So I came delayed entry, got the house sold. I left, processed through the maps and left.
Okay, so it was pretty good timing with the house.
Yeah. Another married couple that was basically our coworkers. They just happened to be in the market, so it worked out easy. And it was May of '93 when I left. So I was 23 years old. So I'm already, a few years older compared to, I guess, what would be the majority. Mm-hmm. But we had quite the mix of people. There was a few in there that were about my age, a couple that were older. I was one of those that managed to stay kind of low-key.
Okay.
If I'm alive 30 years from now, I might not remember my own name, but I'll remember Senior Airman Whitaker, for crying out loud. Big dude, he had to have his sleeves tailored because his arms were that big. He was a senior airman. We also had a buck sergeant because at that time there was still the buck sergeants, not many. But we had a buck sergeant. But for some reason, the way we were set up, Senior Airman Whitaker was the primary TI, and Buck Sergeant Bennett, I think Bennett was his name, was the assistant. Yeah, he was all of them. It just baffles me how they come up with the stuff that they do. So anyway.
So then you went to Keesler
Air
Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, and you're going into the communications field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had the old systems that were very dedicated systems where to send message traffic from one base to another, an individual would have to have a designated computer that you created your message, and you would save it to floppy disk.
Okay.
Old school. And then you would bring that floppy disk to the base Comm Center to send it to, whatever destinations. old school stuff, man. Old
Yeah.
school stuff. And at my first assignment from tech school, when we all picked up, what our first assignments were supposed to be, I picked mine up and I was supposed to go to Yokota, Japan. There was a handful of us that in my class that were destined to go to Yokota. There was the bigger part of me that was like, oh man, wow, right out the gate, going to Japan. I was all kinds of hyped. But then almost immediately, I realized that what at that time was my wife, that she was having a bit of a tough time being separated. What it was is that when I got the assignment, I was told that the way it was going to work is that they would send me there first by myself until I was to get base housing, but it wasn't available right away. And so at that time, it was, I think, an estimated 2.5 to 3 months before I could secure base housing. And I thought to myself, oh, geez, here's my wife that was falling apart because I was gone for just 6 weeks at basic training. She didn't even last for me to get through tech school. And I thought, dang, if I got to go halfway around the world for that long, not that I would have liked it, but I would have been okay, for the opportunity to go to Japan.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, this ain't going to work. I got to find somebody to swap assignments with. I can't believe I'm saying this, I'm thinking it. And so, I start looking. There is one individual, this girl that she was looking to do a swap to because, just...
I can only imagine where she was stationed.
Her orders were to Grand Forks, North Dakota.
And you did it.
I had to. She was the only one that stepped up.
North Dakota.
Grand Forks, North Dakota.
That's respectable of you to do that for your family.
So the funny part of it is that by that time, all of us had made contact with our assigned sponsors. And so we get to where we accomplish this assignment swap, and I make my first call up to the shop there, Grand Forks, to let them know, hey, there was an assignment swap, and now I'm the one coming up. And they're like, what? What happened to the girl? Ah, no. We're going to kick your bleep when you get up here. And, of course, they were joking, but it's...
Man, way to make a first impression.
Yeah, and so, but you know what? As it turns out, the coworkers that I had there and the friends that I made, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah.
Funny how those kinds of things work, There's one in particular that I still keep in touch with all the way from freaking 1993.
Dang.
There's a few others that I haven't, which I'm going to try to reach out to, but it really turned out to be something good. The minus 30-something degrees in January wasn't,
From St. Louis, how much of a difference is that?
I mean, St. Louis gets some pretty solid, what you would call winter weather, but holy crap, Grand Forks, North Dakota, son of a gun, They were really big on preaching, winter safety. In the winter months, make sure you have this list of things in your car just in case you break down somewhere, because it's literally a matter of life and death, which, in fact, there was one winter where a lieutenant that was driving between base and town, which I think was about maybe 12, 13 miles. And sure enough, he broke down. And what did he do? He got out of his car and started walking.
No way.
This was nighttime, if I remember right, where already it's cold enough during the day, and the nighttime, multiplied. By the time he was found, he lost a few fingertips, a couple of his toes, some serious frostbite, and he wasn't too far from dead. So, yeah, pretty extreme. Just barely over 3 years. That was my first assignment. Some really good people. Worked old school base Comm Center, where they did kind of start network communications in its infancy. I didn't get in on the shop there, but it was kind of interesting now to think back and see it from the very start, and then comparing it to how it evolved to the point when I retired.
So 3 years, and all of a sudden you get an assignment overseas.
Germany, Ramstein. And boy, was I stoked for that. In fact, that was where my dad was stationed. It was one of the Army bases that shut down like years before. But, it was just really super exciting to get an assignment to a place like Ramstein, Germany.
Yeah.
It was old school base Comm Center. They had 2 locations. There was the primary one in the Comm Squadron that most people around the base would go to, and then I was at the other one, which was, I would go down this parking lot to the end of the parking lot where it was a dead end. What you saw from the ground was this small little building that couldn't have been, more than a couple hundred square feet, very small little structure. And all it was, an elevator access and then a guard shack. From there, when you check in through the guard, you go down like 50 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's where they had, like some sort of command post, and they had some functionality. Yeah. The arrangements, like, for example, Cheyenne Mountain, the whole nuclear bunker kind of thing, right? So that was the Comm Center that I worked at.
So each day you would be going
down. Which was,
cool.
Boy, I tell you what, when you had to work the 12-hour shifts, especially in the wintertime with limited daylight, you go in before the sun comes up.
Man.
You don't come out until the sun has set. Yeah.
That can take a toll on you.
Yeah. But, yeah.
I wanted to jump back to your dad. What did he do in the Army?
Civil engineering.
Really? Civil, okay.
Bridge builder, where, they had the equipment that they would roll up to the side of a river, for example, and then it'd be like the structure that folds out, kind of like transformers, The whole process, I think, that involves setting pontoons out in the water and then stretching this bridge structure across the river kind of thing.
And so that's close to your machinist when you were
Kinda,
in the
sort
machine
of.
shop.
Kind of, sort of. Yeah, right.
I wanted to check because my dad was on a tank crew in Germany.
Oh,
So,
okay. Pretty cool,
I
actually.
think the times weren't overlapping the same.
No,
but
he did. Yeah, from 63 to 65 is when he was there.
Yeah, my dad was in the 70s.
70s, okay.
But they might have been on the same grounds.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so Germany.
Yeah, so I did 4 years there, and that was pretty fun. I mean, duty-wise on the base, it got a bit rough. Kind of kicked my butt a little bit, the way things operated. But still, they're very good people to work with. I bet you that makes all the difference in the world.
Right.
It doesn't matter what base you go. If you get Thule, Greenland, it could still be a good thing if you have the right people there to work with and work for.
Sometimes the more austere the location, the higher the morale.
Absolutely. Just because of, getting tight-knit with the people that you work with. Yeah. So 4 years there. It was good times going to Oktoberfest a couple of years and the other festivals and such, going to visit all the surrounding countries when I could. I never had the nice car to go buzzing down the Autobahn at 100 some odd miles an hour. I always had the hoopties.
Were you on base or
there was
downtown?
Yeah, there was a short period of time where we stayed on base. Not by my choice. It was something that...
It could be intimidating.
Yeah.
To move, the local economy.
True, and I get that. Yeah, and so I didn't fight it too much when the wife wanted to be on base. I understood it, but I knew in the back of my mind, that stairwell living, that it can get old. And sure enough, she had enough of it, and we ended up off base, which to me was always, it's always more interesting when you can immerse yourself into those kinds of cultures. It was a good experience, very good experience. Anybody that joins the military, if there is ever any chance to go take some time overseas, everybody I think owes it to themselves to try. From that, came back stateside to Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, I'm doing some math, and I'm thinking that this is where we meet, and we start working together.
Yeah.
When was your month?
January of 2000. Wait a second. 2001. Yeah, 2001. Because I did the Millennium New Year's celebration in Paris when I was in Germany.
Oh, lucky
That was
you.
easy to go to, yeah. My youngest brother came to visit. Yeah, the two of us went to Paris. That was insane. So, yeah, 2000, because I also did my TDY to Saudi, my first TDY to Saudi that year.
You did in 2000.
Yeah.
Okay, out
right.
of Germany.
Yeah. So that was easy. That was almost like a little vacation even. I don't even want to call it deployment. I was in the network shop there, which wasn't anything high end, but I was in, sort of like the help desk function over there. Riyadh. Yeah, that was a 3-month deal. I had the one special project that came up, basically to identify and map out all the Cat5 cable that was strung around. See, over time, the way things get done in deployed locations is not the way you do, you know? And so as things were getting built up, it was Escon Village. Anytime that somebody needed a network connection, just got a length of Cat5 cable and which is the closest building that has a repeater or a hub or something, and tack one end of a Cat5 cable into that, and then out a window to string Cat5 cable to the next building, and inside that window to the computer that needed a connection. So after years of doing that, and so here's Cat5 strung around everywhere like clotheslines.
Wow.
And so there it became my task. It was actually me and another, I was still a senior airman then, and so it was a staff or tech from another shop that was tagged to kind of help me out a little bit. He lasted about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks of going around, and the rest was up to me. I was hiking. This was all the summer months, and I'm sitting here hiking around Escon Village, trying to identify and map, old school paper map, every single strand of Cat5 cable.
No way.
But I got it done, identified everything, and put it on a map because I think there was some sort of deal where eventually the Army was going to take over Escon Village, and they wanted that information. So anyway, so yeah, that was summer 2000. And then come back to Ramstein, and then I was just rolled right into my out processing, more or less, to leave that and end up in, off at Air Force Base.
So you went from North Dakota over to Germany and then back to Nebraska.
Nebraska,
Ooh.
right. And that got cold there, too.
Yes, it did.
Dang.
So Bellevue, Nebraska, just outside of Omaha.
Uh-huh. January of 2001 when I got there. And you got when?
I think August of 2000.
Yeah, you were already there by a little bit.
What was the shop?
Alternate Missile Warning Systems Center, where Cheyenne Mountain was our primary people.
Now, did you get a chance to go out to Cheyenne Mountain for
Yes.
a tour? Okay,
yes,
good.
there was 4 or 5 of us. Boy, I'm trying to remember the names now. Sorry, guys. Anybody out there that hears this podcast, I'm sorry.
Won't that be cool though? If they're
yeah,
listening?
absolutely, man.
To figure out how to get it out.
Yeah, for sure.
So okay, how about Sergeant Norris?
Yes, I went with Sergeant Norris and then like 3 or 4 other guys, and we rented a minivan to go drive out there.
Gotcha.
Holy smokes! Whatever highway that is that cuts through the state that is straight as an arrow and nothing on either side except corn, wheat, whatever. Oh my gosh, it was like the road to nowhere.
The plains of Nebraska.
Yeah. We ended up out there because we communicated with them on a regular basis, the names and voices all the time, and then finally get to meet them face to face. So that was cool. And to see the whole facility and how it worked, how it was set up. Took a little side trip to the Coors Brewery.
Oh, okay.
So that was fun. All those years that I lived in St. Louis, and never once stepped in the Anheuser-Busch Brewery for their tour. That was fun to go check it all out. And then, boy, I tell you what then, when September 11 hit, everybody pretty much remembers where they were and what they were doing. I remember there was sort of a dead chunk of time where there really wasn't anything going on in the shop, and there was, how there was the TV mounted up in the one corner of the floor there. So we walked over to turn the TV on just to, flip through the channels and see what was on. First thing showed the one tower with smoke coming out, and we're like, huh? and flipping the other channels, and they're all showing the same thing. Everybody, if I remember right, that's, doing that. And then we're just like, that's the Twin Towers. And I was like, you're right. And then as we're sitting there watching, wondering what the heck, then that's when in real time,
right,
we see with the camera focus, the second plane plowing into the other tower. And we just look at each other and we're like, oh, bleep.
Yeah.
And, immediately we get everybody else's attention and we're just like, what do we do? I remember thinking to myself, son of a gun, how aggravated I was that we have this equipment here that is missile warning systems, right? Tracking missiles. But we were like a completely separated world from things like tracking planes.
Yeah.
And being privy to that kind of information. Yeah. And I was so aggravated about, what the heck could we do? Even if we had the kind of equipment and the functionality to track planes, well, what are we going to do?
Right.
The next thing I know, that building that we were in locked tighter than I don't think I could make an analogy without getting vulgar, but our building, the one where President Bush he came to our building, and I was like, this is real, this is happening, this is nothing I would have imagined or expected in my wildest dreams. And boy, that was surreal. By the time I managed to get out, because at that time I had my 2 kids with me, because I was getting divorced, or I was already divorced, and it was agreed that I would keep them with me for that one particular school year while my ex was making her arrangements with her new husband to get reassigned stateside. And in the meantime, I would have our kids with me to do a school year at Offutt instead of having to deal with the whole PCS thing. So I had them with me in sort of like a daycare / kindergarten kind of a arrangement. And so, by the time I was allowed to leave, I exit the building, and then I see, guards posted all around the whole building. I go up to leave out the gate, and there's a Humvee with, the 50 cal mounted and someone standing there on the turret. I'm like, this is Omaha, Nebraska. How big this? I mean, I was having a heck of a time processing all that,
Yeah, it changed everything.
Yeah.
There was no driving through the gate being waved on after that.
Oh. And I never knew that the building that we were in had that sort of command center as a location for scenarios like that. It just blew my mind. So trying to track everybody, make sure everybody was accounted for.
Right. Because I didn't have a cell phone.
No,
in
right?
2000,
right.
01.
Yeah, it wasn't nearly as prevalent like today with phones.
Mm-hmm.
So, dang, crazy times, dude.
So that's where we got stationed together first.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I remember your next assignment, and where was that at?
Camp Humphreys, the Air Force squadron located on an Army post.
How would you describe your first time being in a combat comm unit?
It was a welcome change for me. I felt like this is the kind of, military life that I was wanting to dive into and at least give it a try. Because within that unit is that sort of atmosphere and culture that was, it's different from what you and I had there at Offutt, what I had for the most part in Germany, and what I had at Grand Forks, just different. And it was a very welcome thing for me to get that at that time. It's the sort of thing that I would have felt well enough to keep myself in that kind of environment and culture at least a longer time than just that 1 year. But, we were looking through those pictures, and there was that one guy in our shop that he actually pulled the trigger on doing that blue to green to go Army. Mm-hmm. Again, just to plug into that sort of a environment and that culture that he felt was more his thing. And that extra bit, with us making it on the Op 4 team.
That's one of the most fun parts for me. Being a part of the combat comm squadron, you had to go to a
mob school.
Yeah. So an important part of mob school would be the enemy, right?
Yep. I guess that was a dedicated team that at that time, at least when we were there, and for all the time prior to when we got there, apparently, where you had to try out for it. And you and I, we made it, man. We got in it. And the fun that we had playing the bad guys. Oh, my goodness. Good times, man.
Yeah, sometimes it's not a fair fight when on our side we know what to do. We know
Yeah.
exactly where to go.
Right.
And then if they haven't been in that situation
Right.
before.
Plus, you know, when you're out there running around and you got your weapons, regardless of whether it's, you know, the standard M16s or whatever, they're all set up to fire blanks, right? So they can only be so realistic. When there's real legit hot lead flying through the air, that really changes everything. So, you know, there is that. But, yeah, I would say for me, Korea was, I mean, every assignment is good in its own way. But for me, Korea was, you know, top notch.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
So after Korea, I can't remember your follow-on where you
I went to Hawaii.
Come on.
Yep.
Okay, so now the Air Force is making up for sending you to North Dakota. Germany, which is still cold, and then
Very.
to Nebraska.
So that's a 3-year deal. They're back to regular fixed network communications kind of a thing. And I tell you what, though, you say Hawaii and it's like, wow, lucky you. But I would tell, and there's plenty of people that know this, Hawaii, just like any other place, there's good and bad. There is, of course, all the things like you see on the vacation brochures and the calendars and so forth. And that's all very real. But there's also that part that is just very blah. I lived in 3 different houses while I was there. And the last one, there was the house next door to me where, you know, the guy that lived there, he was nice enough to talk to. But I always saw him working in the front of the house. There wasn't any garage. It was just a driveway coming up to the front of the house. And I always saw him working on cars. And I'm thinking, oh, you know, here's a guy, you know, he's doing always wrenching on different cars, trying to make an extra buck working from home, fixing cars. And one day I come home for lunch. First thing I noticed was a guy with the local news channel. And I'm like, what's going on? You know, it was right next door to my house. What was really going on is that it was a bust. The cops caught this guy running a doggone chop shop. How do you do that and get away with it for any length of time? And so, you know, my point is that Hawaii, there's the very, very nice, and then there's the very, very not so nice. So that's where I ended up meeting my second wife, which was quite the coincidence because we first met on my first deployment. The one where I went to Saudi for 3 months in the summer of 2000. That's where we had first met. We both end up at that same rotation at Escon Village. So we knew each other that chunk of time. That was summer 2000. And so now here we are in the early part of 2004. They had this deal at Hickam for like an orientation. And so there we were for this orientation. And we didn't even cross paths or see each other until there was a bus ride to go around the island. And it wasn't even until after that bus ride was done. All this time, all day long, doing this orientation. And then finally to the end of the bus ride is when we crossed paths and she looked at me and I looked at her. I'm like, hey, I know you. And so shortly after that, we were hooked up. And then when it came to the end of our time there at Hickam, we said, okay, we want to stay together. And so we tried to see if we can just arrange the same assignment, you know, even though technically we weren't married. And sure enough, we both ended up assignments to go back to Korea, to Osan. And we thought, I mean, it doesn't work out better than that, except that she had her one kid with her that she couldn't get command sponsorship for. Because at that time, for most Air Force personnel, it was considered a remote tour. And so we decided, okay, let's just go on ahead and get married, drop the orders to Osan, and apply for joint spouse. So that's what we did. We applied for joint spouse, and we thought, well, we'd like to stay overseas. get one more overseas assignment at least before getting brought back stateside. And for as much as we tried, we kept getting denied. And every time we turn around, there was something going on in the system that was bringing us here to Montgomery, Alabama. And that's what ended up happening, is that we got this joint spouse assignment to come here to Montgomery. And I tell you what, we came kicking and screaming. Of all the places around the world, we end up here in Montgomery, Alabama. So here I am now, still retired since 2013. While I was on terminal leave, picked up a contract job working in the exact same office. I was doing project management, doing the same work in the same office, working with the same people.
So that probably helped with the transition, not to be too much of a drastic change.
True. Very true. So that part was easy enough. But it was a very short-term contract. I think like just 5 or 6 months. It wasn't long-term. It was just for one specific project to do network installations, upgrading old equipment around various bases around the globe. So, that was all good and well. That's what got me to go back to Korea. I was part of a 3-man team to go to a couple of bases in Korea to do some equipment upgrades. And I took that opportunity to go back to Camp Humphreys and go check it out. And holy crap, how much it changed. Yeah, and you'll see, because you said you're going. You're slotted to go, right? You need to go to the hump and check it out.
Yeah, I remember you sent pictures.
Yeah,
you
right.
emailed me some pictures. And
our old dorm that was just completely vacant, not being used, just things around post. Dude, when we were there, like I said, remote assignments, very few slots that were authorized for family members. I went back and there's daycare centers, and spouses walking their kids in strollers, 4, 5, 6-story barracks buildings, or I don't know if they were barracks or if they were family housing. It was just really something to see. I was just completely discombobulated, knowing what it was like from when we were there earlier versus what I saw in 2013. You got to go. You'll see. I was just happy to see the TriTac where we worked, and then just trying to, from that pinpoint, to try and see all around me. Even the road itself is different now. Part of the roadway as we knew it is still there, but just cut off, and it dead ends into just nothing. And then a new road that was paved down. All these kinds of details that was just so confusing. If you get there, man, you got to go check it out. So,
yeah, I'm going to do that.
And then plus, how different right outside the base with all the clubs and the bars. A lot of them just boarded up, completely shut down because of, the whole thing with the human trafficking.
Right. So it's more of a family.
Yes. I think I remember sending you a picture where there was still the IDK club.
Oh, was it still there?
That was still there, and it looked like, it wasn't all closed up like a lot of the other ones. So that I looked at it, I was like, okay, at least this is still in business. So I was glad to see that.
It was about the size of this room, wasn't it?
It was tiny. And we would pack in 30 people or something like that. And then at the end of that bar, I remember where there was when you could go to any of these souvenir shops and they have what is that bell, that Korean bell with the little swinging hammer deal that you can, She had one of those there at the end of the bar, and the rule was that for anyone who would go ring the bell, they would buy a round of soju shots. That was the standing rule. You go ring the bell, and I remember a few times where I would go and I'd hang out, and I'm like, okay, just hang tight. And I would wait until I'd see where the place was pretty much just jammed full. I mean, it would not be allowed anywhere here in the United States for, number of personnel allowed in one space. But, in Korea, anything goes. And I would wait for that. And then I would squeeze my way on over to where, this bell was sitting at the end of the bar, and then just ding, and then one big collective yeah from everybody, and I'd be the one to buy a round of soju shots for everybody, which was easy because it's just super cheap, simple soju with the whatever flavor of Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
So good times, man, good times there. And so I had that chance to go back through that short period of a contractor and having that project. But after that, as far as anything military related, that ended up being the end. I always had that thought in the back of my mind, that I liked before I came in the Air Force, the whole thing of doing machine shop work, metalworking, machine shop type work.
Yeah.
And so there's the local community technical college here in town that has that program. They have things like that: diesel mechanics, welding, the machinist program, and some various other things like that. So I decided, I'd like to kind of pursue something more along those lines again. And so there, I signed up, and I ended up going through that whole program, and that felt good. That felt right. Something like I wanted to get back to. Complete departure from my high-tech world of network communications in the Air Force. I would say that it is an extremely good job to get into. The training that you get and the things that you can do, it is very much a good job to get into. And then especially military people that have security clearances, geez, that in itself is worth its weight in gold. I mean, I managed to keep a TS security clearance for my entire military career. Tell you what, I could have stepped into any number of jobs with the time in the field and having that clearance, but I felt like I've had enough of doing that. Sitting in front of the computer all day long, feeling like Dilbert, Dilbert comic strip, Cube Farm, and then those times like at Ramstein, working in that Comm Center, 4 or 5 stories down, in that bunker kind of environment, working 12-hour shifts. It sounds cool and all, but it kind of wears on you after a while. So, yeah, I ended up complete departure from all of that when I got out.
It sounds like with your dad being a civil engineer and you work in machine shop before the Air Force, that it's maybe you're going back to what feels right. I think that's good.
It's just kind of what ticked in my head a little bit better. So that was that. But I tell you what, I guess all in all, I didn't get to do nearly as much as some other people in the military, the super exciting, high-end, high-speed stuff. And I think about that sometimes, the different track that I could have done in basic training. I remember there was my flight and my brother's flight that we were gathered in a room, and there was one each, guys from pararescue and combat control, which is the special forces for the Air Force, that were there to give their spiel about what they were about. And if there was any of us that had an inclination to get in on it, that was the opportunity. That moment, at that time, during basic training, here's your chance. And in my mind, I'm like, oh man, this is what got my blood flowing. An alternate course in life that I passed up. And then, in Korea, where I ended up having a conversation with a warrant officer, because we had the Chinook helicopters. You remember, we had the Chinook. It was basically right across the street from our compound. That was the flight line. And so I got to talking with a warrant officer that was a pilot for those Chinooks. And he let it known to me that the door is wide open in the Army for the warrant officer program to do that. And at that time, I was divorced. I wasn't attached to anybody or anything. And for whatever reason that I can't think of right now, I didn't try. So, just big fat blah on that. And, those kinds of things, the exciting high-speed things that you can do in the military, and I didn't pull the trigger on any of those. But everything for a reason. I didn't do that bit from basic training, and so things went the way they went, where the easiest thing to point to is having my 2 kids, which I didn't at that time. And who knows how it would have worked out. So I can't be so angry or regretful because I got those 2 kids. Me not pulling the trigger on that warrant officer program from when I was in Korea, I landed in, Hickam, where I met, well, again, my now soon to be ex. But my point is that with her, she had her daughter there already with her, and
Right.
in that time she became my daughter. In my mind, she is my girl,
Mm-hmm.
and so I can't have an ounce of resentment or regret just simply because of that.
That's right, man. And over the next 30 years, I think all those things are going to multiply.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right now, I have a grandson.
Do you? Grandpa.
I am a grandpa for the last
Congratulations.
4 years, 5 years, 5 years. Yeah.
What do you go by?
Well, in Italian, grandpa is nonno, Nonno, nonno.
No.
Grandma is nonna.
Okay.
In those languages, the O's and the A's, masculine, feminine,
Okay,
all of that.
right.
Nonno and nonna. So, yeah, that was weird, becoming, a grandpa at 40-something years old. But, it's altogether, I guess what I would say is that to have decided to pull the trigger and go into the military, there is absolutely zero regrets. I would do it all over again 100 times.
Right.
All of us that wore a uniform in some way, shape, or form, we all served our country. And, for me, I did one bit there in Saudi. I had 2 other deployments. The last one was to Kuwait. And so, there's mostly Air Force, but there was some interaction with Army, I think a couple of Navy, a couple of Marines. But the one, that was quite different for me was Afghanistan. Boy, what a cluster that was. Just, oh my gosh, what a cluster that was. I got sent to Kabul, and that was the most exposure for me. I mean, aside from Korea, being on an Army post, but in a deployed setting like that, the primary body of personnel where I went, Camp Phoenix, was an Army National Guard unit. And then there was a presence of, naturally, the Marines and the Navy. So to interact, with the different services in that context just adds a lot to your experiences and your life as a whole. I mean, as frustrated as I was about certain things, being over there, bad things that will stick to me for the rest of my life. But, not just the U.S. forces, but the coalition too. See, and there was a lot of that there. And so my respect and my thoughts extend to the foreign nations. When Memorial Day rolls around, first and foremost, my mind is just flooded with the thoughts of our fallen brothers and sisters. But in my mind, I don't stop there. I think about the coalition forces that didn't make it back home alive.
Absolutely.
So it's to be a veteran, it's actually something special. So
Thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Oh, geez. Thank you so very much for this.
Is there anyone you would like to dedicate your podcast to?
Oh, goodness. I would say my kids, because it's never easy for kids to have their moms and dads coming and going,
right?
And to be gone for, birthdays and Christmases and stuff like that. So to my kids, dedicate this to them. And then, again, to all the other veterans out there, I salute all of you. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, Paul, from one vet to another, thanks for your service and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Roger that. Thanks, Brian. It was an honor to serve with you.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Likewise. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening. I want to leave you with the Behind the Rack Veterans Pledge. If you know someone in your life that needs to hear it, please pass it on. I believe, as a veteran, I am part of an exclusive community, and the best exclusive communities are the ones you had to do something to be a part of, not pay to get in. I believe, as a veteran, my military experience brings value to the civilian world. I realize the parts of my service that may seem ordinary to me seem extraordinary to others. And I believe, as a veteran, I am on a hero's journey, and the things I've learned during service can bring value, purpose, and meaning to my life after service.